In the world of modern fiction, few novels dare to weave time, memory, and consequence with such quiet precision. Rachel Joyce's Perfect is one of them. It is, on the surface, a tale of childhood, of friendship, of moments so small they might be missed if you blink. But beneath, it is a mirror, reflecting the invisible machinery that shapes a life. In this review, we step inside Joyce's careful design. We follow Byron and Jim across decades. To ask, not just what happened, but why it lingers long after the last page is turned. This is not merely a story. It is a question, disguised as a novel. When we hear the name Rachel Joyce, many of us first think of her famous novel The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. That was the book that, with the simplest storytelling, managed to carry the deepest emotions into the hearts of millions of readers. Before entering the world of novels, Joyce had spent years writing plays and scripts for BBC Radio. That work trained her eyes and ears to attune to the rhythm of words, precise pauses, and even meaningful silences. But, 1 year after Harold Fry's success, Joyce decided to step into darker and more complex territory. The result was her second novel, Perfect. Its title may seem simple, but we gradually discover that this perfection is not meant to be anything real or attainable. The story revolves around a seemingly tiny, insignificant incident that could change the future of several people. A large part of the plot takes place in 1970s England, a time when the country was caught between past and future, economic crises, cultural shifts, and a society struggling between tradition and modernity. This historical backdrop was exactly what Joyce needed to raise the novel's central question. If just a few seconds of your life were altered, how would everything that follows change? The novel has a dual narrative structure. One storyline follows a boy named Byron, who sees events through his childlike eyes. The other follows a man named Jim, living in the present day. At first, the two narratives seem unrelated, but, as we move forward, their connection becomes increasingly evident. When Perfect was published, critics had mixed reactions. Some said it was more mature and more precisely written than Harold Fry. Others argued that its structural complexity and frequent shifts in perspective made it harder to connect with. Yet, the novel's strong sales and presence on bestseller lists proved that Joyce had found a space between popular fiction and serious literature, where simple language blends with deep layers of psychology and social insight. For us, this book is valuable and important, because it offers a rare combination of personal storytelling, a philosophical inquiry into time and fate, and the ability to connect emotionally with today's reader. This is exactly the path we pursue in our channel, linking academic analysis with a human perspective and everyday experience. The story of Perfect begins on a morning that is unlike any other, even if everyone, except one imaginative boy, thinks it is ordinary. Byron, the young protagonist, is a boy who measures life with a meticulous obsession for hours, seconds, and seemingly small events. For him, any discrepancy between real time and the time recorded on a clock can mean something extraordinary or even dangerous. One day, something shifts in the clock, or perhaps in reality itself, so subtly that adults might never notice it. But for Byron, it is precisely the moment when everything changes. That delicate and ambiguous feeling is like the first faint wave approaching from a distance, a wave that will later crash ashore as a powerful storm. From this point onward, the novel takes a path that combines the imaginative adventures of a child with the unspoken pressures of the adult world. To understand what has happened and its consequences, Byron turns to his best friend, James. Together, with their curious minds and unfiltered perspective, they delve into details that to them are matters of life and death, but that might seem, to an outsider, like nothing more than a series of trivial events. Even so, Perfect, is not just Byron's story. The chapters shift, subtly, but deliberately, between past and present. In the second narrative thread, we meet Jim, a man who, in his adult life, has retreated to a quiet, almost forgotten corner. Jim is a man, with a secretive past, repetitive habits, and a hidden fear of disturbing the safe, predictable rhythm of his days. At the start, the reader has no idea how the two narrative lines are connected. Byron explores the world through a child's eyes, while Jim drifts through his days with a heavy heart and unspoken experiences. Gradually, signs begin to appear, familiar words, similar places, and ideas that, like thin threads, begin to entwine the two lives. The atmosphere of the story thrives on contrast. A bright world, full of colors, sounds, and imagined events, as seen by a child, set against the quiet, gray adulthood, where everything is governed by logic, limitations, and calculated consequences. This constant shifting, between past and present, between innocence and experience, preserves a sense of discovery and suspense, right to the end. Rachel Joyce, the author, focuses with the utmost delicacy on small details, a fleeting glance, the sound of a window rattling in the wind, a brief pause between two sentences, or a phrase left unfinished. Each of these tiny moments, like puzzle pieces, will, sooner or later, find their place in the larger picture. Perfect is not a story that propels the reader forward with high-drama scenes or sudden plot twists. Instead, it draws us in through a sense of companionship and curiosity, leading us into situations that seem simple on the surface, but carry deep psychological weight and decisive consequences. Ultimately, the journey stretches both into the past, where one small decision can transform the future of several lives, and into the present, where wounds and memories still hold a vivid, defining presence. At the heart of Perfect stand two central figures, each carrying, in their own way, the main weight of the narrative, Byron and Jim. Byron, in the 1970s storyline, is the kind of child whose mind has firm boundaries, separating him from the adult world, boundaries that crack one morning. He is both innocent and obsessive, his gaze can turn a small incident into a mosaic-like, complex adventure. Byron's vision is full of detail, but he views these details from an angle only a child can manage, truthful, unfiltered, and sometimes in total contrast to adult interpretations. He could be called the starting point for all the novel's questions about time, truth, and the consequences of choices. Alongside Byron is James, his best friend. James is not just a simple companion, he is, in a way, the second voice in Byron's mind, more logical, a little more cautious, yet still, a full partner in all of Byron's risky quests and theorizing. Their relationship is a mix of childlike empathy and unquestioning companionship, showing how two very different perspectives can complete one another. But, when we move into the present day, we encounter Jim, a solitary man, living with the least possible contact with the outside world. He follows tiny, harmless rules in order not to lose control. These rules are both his safety wall and his personal prison. Jim keeps to his routines, faithfully, yet the past, like a long shadow, silently follows him. Jim's relationships with others are limited and sometimes fragile. When faced with people, he is either overly cautious or suddenly reactive. This inner contradiction gives the reader a sense of someone who longs for connection, yet fears it. Beneath his outer layers lies an old wound, perhaps the unspoken link back to Byron's tale. Between these two threads, the secondary characters also hold weight. From Byron's mother, a beautiful woman, trapped in the expectations and restrictions of her time, to others, who each, in some way, reflect the novel's central thread. How a single choice, even a small one, can change the meaning of an entire life. Human relationships, imperfect, are built on subtleties and what goes unsaid. There are no explosive, dramatic exchanges here. Everything lies in glances, pauses, and small gestures. Rachel Joyce understands well that, in the real world, intense emotions often happen silently. And she has brought exactly that into her storytelling. It is these characters, and their relationships, that carry the emotional weight of the book, and make us follow the story, just as they travel through it, with a mixture of doubt, hope, and fear. On the surface, Perfect seems to be a simple tale about a family, a few friends, and two distinct timelines. But beneath that surface lie layers of meaning that make reading it a far richer experience. One of the story's central themes is time. Not merely as hours and minutes, but as something slippery, subjective, and fragile. The very moment Byron senses that time has shifted is, in truth, the moment our journey into the novel's world begins. In Perfect, time is sometimes an enemy, pushing us forward, without allowing us to catch our breath. And sometimes, it is a stubborn memory, pulling us back into the past, even when we try to let it go. Another important theme is the futility born of small events. Joyce shows how a seemingly trivial occurrence, like a small stone dropped into water, can send ripples outward for years. This is the hidden philosophical question of the book. Do we shape our own lives, or have these ripples already set our path in motion before we even realize it? Guilt and innocence also play a powerful role. Byron, with his child's mind, sees the world in black and white. Someone is either at fault or they aren't. But as the story advances, it becomes clear that guilt in the adult world is not an absolute condition. People can inhabit right and wrong at the same time, and it is this contradiction that gives the novel its emotional weight. In the background of all of this, loneliness is ever present. Jim, in the present-day thread, lives it fully. Even when he is among people, there's an invisible distance between him and the rest. Byron has his own kind of loneliness, that of a child who notices what others overlook. These forms of isolation, despite the gap of years, connect, showing that certain feelings remain shared across time and place. From a symbolic perspective, the clock in this story is more than a measuring tool. It is a metaphor for the border between our perception of reality and reality itself. Every time Byron looks at the clock, in a symbolic sense, he is asking, what is real? The settings carry symbolism, too. Open meadows and wide childhood spaces evoke innocence and freedom. In contrast, closed rooms and confined adult spaces represent the fences and limitations life imposes on us. Even silence becomes a symbol, silence between characters, silence in homes, silence between past and present. In the end, Perfect uses its themes to build a mirror, one in which, when the reader looks, they see not just Byron and Jim, but fragments of themselves. Underscore 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 underscore. When we close Perfect, we can't escape the question of how this story reflects our own lives. Perhaps, like Byron, we too have experienced a small moment that changed everything, a moment after which nothing quite returned to what it was before. Or perhaps we are like Jim, who has built walls of routines and personal rules around himself, not always sure whether those walls are protecting or imprisoning him. In today's world, where the speed of news, change, and the pressure of time feel more bewildering than ever, themes like the slipperiness of time, the ripple effects of small decisions, and the hidden role of guilt and innocence still move and breathe with us. Even Jim's loneliness is no longer just a personal experience. Loneliness has now taken on a collective form, right in the midst of our constant, unending bustle. Perhaps the reason Joyce's story lingers is that it forces us to ask whether, between control and letting go, we truly choose, and, more importantly, whether we have any choice at all. Perfect is not simply the tale of the 1970s and a solitary man in the present. It is a kind of literary questionnaire quietly placed in our hands. It is not easy to answer, and perhaps each time we look at our lives, our answer will change. But maybe that is the secret to literature's endurance, that each time we meet it, it speaks to our newest self. This is the same invisible thread that runs from Byron and Jim to us, and from us to the readers who will come after. And now, once you have set the book down, one question hangs in the air. If today a moment occurred that could alter the course of your life, a moment simple, seemingly insignificant, would you notice it? And if you did, what would you do?